JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. So if you haven't seen any of my videos before, this is a recorded Zoom, so the quality isn't the best, but this is because I want to walk you through the ins and outs of Form 1099 NEC, which stands for non-employee compensation. Now, if you don't want to listen to this whole video, because I'm going to walk you through a lot of steps, where to get the software, look at the IRS website, look at the forms, look at the instructions, look at some details, then you're going to see right below a link to a shorter version of this where I'm just not going to go in as much detail. So with this, what we're going to talk about here is Form 1099 NEC. That stands for non-employee compensation. The first thing I'll just note to you is that if you're a small business owner and you have paid anybody over $600 that's not wages, then this is now somebody you would want to consider, well, do I need to send them a Form 1099 NEC? So know this, if you have paid somebody and it's an individual more than $600 and they're not an employee, you 100% need to send them a Form 1099 NEC. If you are paying somebody that has provided a service to you, then they're in probably contention to receive a Form 1099 NEC. If you're buying stuff, let's say at Office Depot or airline tickets or hotel, these are not the people that you, or entities or businesses that you would be sending a Form 1099 NEC to. So with this being said, I'm going to walk through a number of things here. And the other thing I want you to note is that with these forms, unfortunately, there are exceptions to everything. There's a lot of details. And so I would just say, if you have any comments that you would like to put below, just know we're putting together a basic video here. And we're just kind of going through what probably 95% of all small business owners need to do, which is file this Form 1099 NEC. The big thing I'm going to note to you is that this Form 1099 NEC does need to get sent to the recipient on or before January 31st of 2023. That is for 2022. And also you need to file the Transmittal Form, the Form 1096, on or before January 31st, 2023 for 2022. Now, if you're watching this later, these rules are just the same, and you're going to see here in a minute, year after year. With this being said, what if you don't meet that deadline? Well, there'll be some minor penalties, but it would probably be better to go ahead and get these things sent out and e-filed. I'll have a comment to you on that as a backdoor way, that if you do miss the deadline and there's a recipient where maybe they're not technically a Form 1099 NEC, then maybe you could look at sending them a Form 1099 miscellaneous. What the IRS is mostly wanting here is that for those that are receiving income, for those that are getting paid by you, that they otherwise probably wouldn't be aware of their payments, this is who they then want you to send a Form 1099 NEC to. Now, with this, I am just going to mention to you that if you have not gotten the identification number and address for those that you're getting ready to send a Form 1099 NEC to, then you need to do that first and foremost. So if you have identified somebody, and we're going to go through the details, that is a recipient of the Form 1099 NEC, then you want them to fill out a Form W-9, which we'll look at, which really is just going to be their name, their social, their address, and then this is what you need to put on that Form 1099 NEC. But don't sit around and wait to obtain that. Now, people may get upset with you, and there's just nothing you can do when they say, well, I didn't know that was going to be taxable. You say, well, so you thought I was going to help aid and abet you in breaking the law and that you're not going to report your income? I don't know what else to tell you. I'm supposed to send you a Form 1099 NEC. So those probably aren't people you want to do business with going forward if they are very clearly indicating to you that they don't want a Form 1099. Well, there's just nothing you can do about it. You do need to report it. What I am going to note to you is that also for the Form 1099 NEC, the recipient of that typically is going to be in the running to have to pay some self-employment taxes on that. Now, of course, we know there's all exceptions to that. If you send a 1099 NEC to an S Corp or C Corp or partnership that's not subject to it, blah, 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 blah. More just letting you know that when you send out a Form 1099 NEC to somebody, they are picking up that additional self-employment tax in addition to their income taxes, most notably if it is an individual. And the reason I mention that to you is that if you're paying individuals a Social Security number and you're doing anything routine with them, meaning you're hiring them, they're doing routine services for you, then you might consider that you really should make them a W-2 employee. A W-2 employee more likely is the safest route to go because taxes are withheld, Social Security and Medicare. But that's a discussion for another video. All I'm trying to tell you is that this is an area where the IRS is going to be inquiring potentially as we move forward to say, well, we're seeing that you're sending this 1099 NEC. It was a large amount, and you've been sending it year after year to this Social Security number. Are you sure they're not an employee? You don't have to worry they're not going to come and stomp on your doorstep and knock your door down and drag you into jail. I'm just saying that you got to look at these things carefully. So what I'm going to bring up here is various forms and some links. A couple of notes here is that with the Form 1099 NEC, this is what you are sending to the recipient. There's a red copy that you do have to get the special forms. You can't print it from the website, but you do need to buy. And I'm going to show you how you can get a free copy, but it's kind of too late at this point. But you got to e-file or mail in very specifically copy A of these Form 1099s to the IRS. We're going to talk about that. But along with that, if you're mailing this, you got to send in a Form 1096 with it, which is a summary of all your Form 1099s. It already sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it? Well, we're going to walk through it. I think it'll be easier, especially because there are softwares out there that will help you with this. A couple of things is that if you handwrite this, you do risk that the IRS rejects it and you get a penalty for filing late. So you really do need to type these up, get the software, get them printed out. Better to e-file them even if you're not required. The other thing I want you to note is that when you're looking to buy forms, make sure you're getting 1099 NEC because there's a lot of different kind of 1099s. When we're then talking about you sending this Form 1099 NEC to somebody that is now going to have to receive it because they got over $600. Also, when you are looking at these forms, when you look, it'll say this has 50 forms. That means it has 50 1099s. So each page is going to have 2 1099s on it, but you don't send them. This is you want to make sure you really hear this, especially for those that are going to insist on handwriting this. You do not fill out the top and bottom of the red copy and then send that to the IRS. It's one per recipient. We'll show you that. Also, if you are paying an LLC that's taxed as a C Corp or an S Corp, you don't have to send them a Form 1099 unless they're meeting the exception, which would be you paying an attorney. They still need to get one. And when we are looking at the Form 1099 NEC, there's a Form 1099 miscellaneous. And some of the payments that we see with our clients, it's like, well, do they really fall on 1099 NEC? Do they fall on 1099 miscellaneous? Many just default and put it on the 1099 NEC. I don't think you go wrong with that. But what did I tell you earlier? The recipient of that is going to be the one that's going to have to pick up some self-employment tax. So not at all. Don't hear me as I'm finding ways to bend the rules and get around things. I'm just telling you how it is, right? Just telling you how it works. And you do need to e-file these if you have 250 or more 1099s that you are sending out. Now, most small businesses don't have that. I don't think we even have one client that has 250 or more 1099. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. We're going to walk through a number of things. I'm now going to get into kind of the details, the nitty gritty. Again, I do want you to note this. I've been practicing as a CPA for 30 years. I've got 25 years of my own CPA practice. It's all been in tax. But even though I'm telling you all that, those that have some kind of an exception that they're finding, the reason I'm giving you a link to the rules, to what the IRS puts out there, is because really, if you have questions about this, you just need to read it there. I'm going to giving you basically, well, here's what 95% of all small businesses need to do. But if you get into, you're paying a fisherman and you're paying farmers and you're doing something funky, wonky, this and that, and you're using Bitcoin, I don't have an answer to what you do when it's Bitcoin other than here's the rules. You still need to send it to them. You paid them cash, you still need to send it to them. You wrote them a check, you still need to send it to them. One big exception, because if you don't want to listen to all the details, moving on after this, is that if you pay someone by credit card, you don't send them a Form 1099 for the amounts that you paid them on the credit card. Only would be the amount that you would have paid cash or by check or Bitcoin, I guess, nowadays. And the reasoning for that is that the person who received payment by credit card, well, that company that processes their credit card payments, they are going to send that person, that business, a Form 1099-K that will include those payments. So let's get into it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And again, the reason I'm just mentioning this to you is that you're right, it's not the greatest video quality. The bottom line is I'm a practicing CPA. I don't have a studio yet. I'm working with clients every day in the trenches. So I'm just trying to give you some good information, and this is the simplest way to go about it. So what we are seeing here up here is, I'm going to just start with, you can just go to Office Depot and get this software. If you don't have that many 1099s to get out there, what you're wanting to make sure is that you're getting a 1099 NEC laser forms, which they should all be. Get it with the software, because it's sure going to make it a lot easier. So when we see that it's a pack of 50, right? So when we look here, excuse me, that's going to be then 50 recipients. So what you want to be careful of is some of the vendors will say, well, it's 25 pages, which would be 50 recipients. So just be mindful of this, because you don't want to have to go buy more forms. So Office Depot, I'm not going to put a link here because I'm not endorsing this software. And you'll just go to Office Depot, and what you would type in here would be Form 1099. Let's see, Form 1099 NEC, and I use the word software with it, and we'll do a search, and basically you're going to find right here what I had indicated. So the other part is that we use LaserLink. LaserLink is the software here, okay? LaserLink is the software. So again, I'm not going to give you a link to this. You can write it down. You can see what it is here. Because I'm not endorsing it. I don't get anything for it. And regardless, I'm just not going to give this to you. But one of the things I want to note to you is that this does have, at least at this website, the ability to download the software. We've just always used LaserLink. So we just feel good about LaserLink. This right here is $80. It is just the software. So you would need to order the forms separately. So make sure if you're doing 1099 NEC that you order Form 1099 NEC, and you're going to need the Form 1096 if you're going to be mailing in your forms to the IRS, which we will get to that. Now, this right here, just based on what it's telling me on this website, I'll let you read it, but it says the software basically supports all of these things. As you can see, there's a ton of different 1099s. What I like about this is that we do have clients that we're sending out the 1099 miscellaneous. Side note, if you are doing your own payroll reporting and you're buying software to do it, please let this be the last year you do that. You need to hire a payroll company to handle all that. It's just too easy to mess it up. So with that being said, just be mindful that you may be getting the software and you may be able to e-file it, but you still got to have the forms to be able to send to the recipients. So what I want to mention here is that, and I will give you a link to this. This is a Form 1099 NEC. I'm going to go over something with you, but the other one is the Form 1099 miscellaneous. And for basically 99% of all businesses, you're going to either send in a 1099 NEC or a 1099 miscellaneous. The big thing to note here is that when you look at the IRS rules, which I'm going to give you a link to as well in these instructions, basically what it's saying is that you will send a Form 1099 miscellaneous if, when you look here, you're paying rents, royalties, other income. That's where it's like, well, is this something that we need to report on 1099? Does it need to go on a 1099 NEC? You're not seeing something specific. So this is the only box that we would ever use. We don't withhold tax. We don't have clients that withhold tax. We don't have fishing boats or Medicaid. We don't do any of this other stuff, crops, fish, blah, blah, blah. Now, I am going to mention this to you for attorneys right here. You can see in box 10, gross proceeds paid to an attorney. So this would only be used if you paid a settlement to a law firm that then paid the client that that law firm represented. So most notably, it's the insurance companies that are paying out settlements that go to the lawyer, and then the lawyer settles up with that client. So if you just paid an attorney for legal services, you are not going to report that on a Form 1099 miscellaneous in box 10, because when you pay an attorney for their services, you would always do that as a Form 1099 NEC right here in box 1. And it doesn't matter how the law firm is taxed. They could be an LLC, they could be a C Corp or an S Corp. For whatever reason, the IRS says, no matter what legal fees that you pay, you got to report them on 1099 NEC, unless you did pay that by credit card, right? Because what goes on a 1099 NEC or a 1099 miscellaneous is basically what you paid that was not on a credit card. Now, when we look here at the Form 1099 NEC, we're going to see the same thing on page 1 of both things here. And what does this say right here? It says copy A of this form is provided for informational purposes. Copy A appears in red to give you an example of that. But similar, if you can print in color, doesn't work. Okay, it has to be on the special paper that you have to buy. There's a way to get it for free from the IRS, but it's just too late. But it says right here, the official printed version of copy A of the IRS form is scannable, but the online version of it printed from this website is not. So it's not that I printed it in red. It needs to be on the paper that can be scannable. That's why you shouldn't be sending this in handwritten. You need to have this typed up, because not only do you need the paper that's going to be scannable, but it needs to be information that can be scanned. So it says, do not print and file copy A downloaded from this website. A penalty may be imposed. Now, I am going to give you a link to this, but there is a way that you can, let's see, you can order the forms to the Form 1099 miscellaneous and the Form 1099 NEC. So where you would do that is just right here. It says order forms. So I am going to give you a link in the body of this, but forms and publications by U.S. mail, you're out of time. So you're not going to have time to do that unless you're watching this in a future year. And you can do online ordering. Here's the bottom line. Go ahead and check that out if this is something that you want to inquire of. My concern for you would be that you're going to miss the deadline. But nonetheless, I'll give you a link to that. And what that's going to give you then is, as indicated here, the official printed version of copy A. Now, when we look at the Form 1099 NEC, it's pretty simple. What's their name and address? What's their EIN or Social Security number, right? And then what's their name and the street address, and how much did you pay them? So you are the payer, you paid them. What's your ID number? What's their ID number? What's their name? What's their street address? The account number, that's really just for you. Probably aren't getting into worrying about this second TIN. If not, you're just going to have to read the instructions. Here, when you get the pre-printed forms, it should say 2022 on it. You're putting the dollar amount. If you're doing direct sales, you're just going to have to read the instructions about it. If you're withholding federal tax, that's odd. Don't have any clients that have done it. If you withheld state tax, that's odd. Don't have any clients that have done it. If you are in a state that does require you to file a Form 1099 with the state, then you're going to need to just Google the state that you're in and put Form 1099 filing requirements for your state and check that out, because we're just covering the federal level. But if you have a different ID number, then you would put that here. But if you're not filing this with the state, the IRS doesn't really actually care about 6 or 7. Now, when we look at the rest of this, as you can see, this is the exact same thing, but here's a copy that would go to the state, copy 1. This is copy B that goes to the recipient. Here's a little bit of instructions of what I just indicated. Copy 2 is if you have to file it with a different state agency. This is a copy C, that's a copy for you. So with this is what's going to the IRS. So this is what you want to make sure is getting to the IRS on or before January 31st. You can mail these in if you have less than 250 1099s that you're sending out. This is one 1099. And so when you say less than 250 1099s, that means less than 250 recipients. And basically, then you need to get this copy B, to that recipient on or before January 31st of 2023, or if you're watching this in the future year. So the only way that you're filling out this Form 1099 miscellaneous is if we do have a client and they have not paid a law practice. And when we look at the instructions, it's like, well, I don't see anything specific that it has to be on a 1099 NEC. I know that the 1099 needs to go to this recipient. Well, then I have a practice that it's fine that it would go on the 1099 miscellaneous and go right here in box 3. Now, if you're gasping and you can't believe that I just said that, well, best of luck to you. Go figure it out on your own. I'm just giving you working knowledge, how things work. And in 30 years, that's me knocking on wood, never had any of this stuff questioned or inquired of. I don't get into this spookiness and the goofiness of, oh, here's the bottom line. Here's what I'm getting at. You find something different, then you just do that. Then just do that. Okay. All right. Hey, real quick, you can e-file forms with the IRS. You have to have an IRS account set up. So bottom line is we don't do this directly with the IRS. We use a software to e-file. So if you do want to go this route, well, then I'm going to let you look into it, apply it, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now with the 1099, I'm going to give you a link to this. This is basically talking about what's the difference between a 1099 NEC, a 1099 miscellaneous, or a W-2. So W-2 is going to an employee. Now, people that say, well, I have 1099 employees, that doesn't exist. Okay. That does not exist. There's no such thing as a 1099 employee. When you say that, that immediately means actually you should be paying them as an employee, having taxes withheld and on a Form W-2. 1099 miscellaneous, 1099 NEC. So it says payers use 1099 miscellaneous if there's at least $600 in the course of trade or business to a person who's not an employee for services, payments to an employee, or any amount of federal tax withheld under the backup withholding rules. So I'm going to let you read this. We're not dealing really with royalties for most. How do you determine if a worker is an employee or independent contractor? So if you have questions on that, IRS provides some great information here to kind of walk through all of that. The biggest determination related to that is this Form SS8, and that is a worksheet that you can go through and answer these questions. And you can send it to the IRS if you do need the IRS to help you make these decisions. But at the end of the day, we use that at times with clients to walk through this form and ask all the questions and make sure somebody is categorizing somebody properly as an independent contractor and employee. I'm just telling you, when we have clients and they're routinely paying somebody, maybe if it's somebody that has a janitorial business, and I know they're there every week, but if they have a janitorial company, they're there once a week. That might be one exception that they wouldn't get a W-2, but they're definitely going to get a 1099 unless they're an LLC schedule as an S Corp or a C Corp. Now, many will say, well, how do I know how somebody is taxed? So on the Form W-9, I'm just typing this in here real quick. Whoops. IRS Form W-9. So on the Form W-9, I always like to go to About because it's make sure I get the most recent version. But on Form W-9, I told you at the beginning, if you don't have the information from whoever you're going to send this 1099 to, most notably their ID number, then you need to have them fill out a W-9. Now, really, someone should fill out a W-9 at the time that you pay them, if not before. But they are going to then give you their name. If they have a business name, then they're going to indicate how they are taxed. And so when they give this to you, then that allows you to determine what it is that you're going to do about it. So if somebody were to check the box limited liability company and put a C Corp or an S Corp, well, then unless it's for legal services or some other exception, well, you wouldn't need to send them a Form 1099 NEC. Also, if you're paying somebody by credit card, you technically wouldn't need to get a W-9 if you only paid them by credit card. but you're going to get their address, their ID number. Then they're going to give you what ID number. Note here it says, or you don't do both. So the 1099 is either going to go to their social security number or it's going to go to their EIN. If you have somebody and they say, well, I have a social security and I have an EIN. You say, well, what did I pay? Did I pay your business that has an EIN? Yes. Well, then fill out the W-9 for that, because I'm going to issue the 1099 to the entity in which I made my payment. Then they're going to sign it. When they sign this, that doesn't mean that they have signed off that they're an independent contractor. All this is them saying, hey, listen, I, under penalties of perjury, as it says down here below, I'm giving you this information all correct, and I'm a U.S. citizen. So with that, at the end of the day, I'll give you a link to this W-9 is what you would get from them. Now, when we are looking at, go back to, let's see, go back to the instructions. So I'm going to give you a link to these instructions here. But when you are looking here at the 1099 miscellaneous, it says specific instructions for Form 1099 miscellaneous. So file Form 1099 miscellaneous income for each person in the course of your business to whom you have paid the following during the year. Let's go to this, at least $600 for rents, prizes, other income, generally the cash paid for blah, blah, blah. All these things don't really apply here. If you're wondering if you're in a business or not, that should be pretty obvious, okay? You have exceptions here. This one I told you about right here, okay, is one of the big exceptions. Now, if you have payments of rent to a real estate agent or property manager, okay, then you're not going to send them a 1099, because that property manager will then send that the proper form to the owner of that. You're not going to send it to those people that are employees. Business travel allowances, okay, they're not going to go on there. Let's see, compensation for sick. Now, 1099 schedule or 1099K, as a small business owner, you're not sending that out. This is what credit card companies send out. And let's see, gross proceeds paid to attorneys. You can walk through here of what I told you earlier when you use 1099 miscellaneous box 10, or when you're using 1099 NEC, but that backs that up related to that. Let's see, a couple other things here. So this is addressing box 3, other income, on the Form 1099 miscellaneous here. And basically what it's saying is that you use box 3 if it's not reported in one of the other boxes. And so what I was telling you earlier is, if we have a client and they're sending the 1099 and it's going to an EIN, not a social security number, and we're unsure, we don't know if they're an S Corp or a C Corp, because I kind of take the approach, it's like, well, when in doubt, let's send a 1099, right? So if we have something that's kind of in the area of like, well, is this something that we would put on Form 1099 NEC or 1099 miscellaneous? Well, probably just put on 1099 NEC. But from a practical matter, if we have a client and they're like, oh, shoot, we came across this information, we're now after January 31st, it's not something that specifically is required, meaning it's not to a social security number, it's not to an attorney, it's an area of, it's to an entity, we have an EIN. We've just taken a practical approach of going, well, then I guess we go ahead and put that on a Form 1099 miscellaneous. Now, before your head falls off and you freak out, there are times that we just have to go back and amend the 1099 NEC filing, and we report the 1099 NEC in an amended 1096. So with that being said, it just says, well, what is this? And if you can see, it's just a big catch-all, if you will, of what goes in that box 3 of 1099 miscellaneous. So as you can see, there's a ton of instructions here. And so feel free to go through all of that, because I'm just trying to give you a guide. Now, I told you at the beginning, you are filing a Form 1096 with the Form 1099s. Now, if you're e-filing, you don't have to worry about this, okay? Because if you are e-filing, then what you're e-filing is the Form 1096. So let's put in here IRS Form 1096. By the way, whenever I search, I always put IRS first, because then I don't have to see all this other stuff that's not official. And I always go to the about, because that's usually going to give me the most current. But on this Form 1096, same thing. You need the special form. You can't just print it in red and think it's going to work. You got to buy the special forms if you're paper filing this. Note here, it says do not staple. But what you're doing is when you are paper filing this with the IRS, you're going to send all the red copies from the official forms that you bought. Okay. And it's going to be that there's one red form for each recipient. Now, you may see that there's going to be, depending on what software company you buy it from, there may be a 1099 here and a 1099 below it. Well, that's to one recipient and then below's to another recipient. My point is that all the copies that are going to the recipients, you are going to send that, if you're doing it by mail, to the IRS, and you have to include on top this Form 1096. So it's your name, address, who to contact, phone number, email, fax, your EIN. Hopefully you're not you don't have a small business that you're still using your Social Security number, but if you're a small business and you only have a Social Security number, well, rectify that, okay? Get yourself an EIN. But then the number of forms here is then what you're going to indicate, the number of forms that you're including, and then you will check the box and you can see all these different 1099s, but you would be checking the box for 1099 miscellaneous or 1099 NEC, just depending on which one you're filing. So if you're filing 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC, then at least what we understand is that you'll send in a 1096 with all your 1099 NECs, and then you'll separately send a 1096 with all of your 1099 miscellaneous. If you think it should be done differently, then just do it. This indicates then where you mail this. So where do you file it? So based on where you're at is depending on where then you will mail this. So anyways, let's see. Send all the information, returns, paper files with 1096 to the following. Here's all the states. Well, that is interesting. I'm noting that it doesn't actually list all the states. I got to back up to show you something. So sit tight. This is the IRS's form. It's not mine. Let's see real quick. When we are looking at, want to circle back when it says total number of forms, that's box 3. If you look at the last page of Form 1096, it tells us about box 3. And basically what it's telling you is that when you say the number of forms, okay, it's not the number of pages, as they tell you right here. What they are wanting you to tell them is really what it would be this: how many recipients are being included in this 1096? So the example they gave is that if you're submitting a form and that software company's produced it where there's 3 on one page, so 3 Form 1099s on one page, and only 2 of them are filled out, that you would put in box 3, there are 2 forms. And that means that even though there's a page that had 3 forms on it, there's only 2 recipients, well, then you're going to put 2 forms. So you can go ahead and read that for yourself. That's pretty clearly what it's indicating there. All right, let's talk about where to mail the Form 1096. As I was showing you, it didn't give us all of the addresses. So I'm giving you a link to the general instructions for Form 1096. And if we just scroll down here, you will see where to file here. So where do you file? This is it. So depending on what state you're in, then this would be where you mail it. Now, if you're e-filing the returns with the software, then of course you're not going to mail anything to the IRS because you would have e-filed it. But whether you're e-filing or not, meaning if you're going to mail this into the IRS, but you do want to keep a copy of what you're sending to the IRS in terms of that summary of what would go on that Form 1096, as well as then a copy of all of the Form 1099s that you're sending, and you should keep those in normal circumstances at least 7 years. So in short, too late, right? What you're doing is you're sending a 1099 NEC to each person that you should receive it to. When in doubt, send it, other than the exceptions we talked about. And then you are going to send in a Form 1096 with that. If you're mailing it, you're going to get that all in by January 31st, 2023. What I'm going to give you links to is that Form W-9. That Form W-9 is if you are needing now to get the ID number from the person, this is what you want them to fill out. I'll just tell you from a practical matter, if you're down to the wire and you can't get this W-9 out of them, which you need to get, at least get their ID number and get them the 1099. That is way important there. Don't let it be an excuse of, well, I couldn't get a Form W-9. If you got the info, send it. But bottom line is you really do need to have a W-9. And then I'm going to give you a link here that talks about what's the difference between 1099 NEC and independent contractors and 1099 miscellaneous. And I'm going to give you a link to this Form 1099 NEC, which is really as an example. Now, there have been a few times that we have been in a pinch, and there's always circumstances that we have just gone here to the PDF. We've done a form fill and we've sent the recipient their 1099 NEC. We've had a few times where we didn't have the software yet, and someone was in a panic for some dumb reason. They needed their 1099 NEC. The world was coming to an end. So we just filled it out and sent it to them. It's not efficient, number one. Number two, you're not going to be able to do that on the red copy. So you really do need to go ahead and get those forms and get that software. I'll give you a link to the 1099 miscellaneous, and then I'm going to give you a link to the instructions for 1099 miscellaneous and NEC, as well as a link to the 1096, as well as then the instructions to that. If you want to order these forms for the next year, well, here's where you can go about it. If you have an IRS account, you want to look into it about just e-filing directly with the IRS, well, here's how you can do it. What I'm telling you is that when I first started to do these for clients, I went to Office Depot and I bought this handy dandy program that had the software, it had the kit. I made sure I got the right 1099, meaning 1099 NEC, and it has the red forms in it. And for when you're just starting out, small business, you're filling out, you're sending it in the IRS. Where we are now is we really do want to have the full software that kind of covers all these different forms. And we have a bunch of clients we're doing them for. So we buy the forms. And so we're buying the software, and separately we're buying all the forms. And again, I told you, I'm not going to give you links to these two things. You can just Google it and find these things just as easy. And you might find something that's got a better price. But really, at the end of the day, this is just part of owning a business, having to comply with some of these things. And so what I am going to also tell you is that because there are so many exceptions and little tweaks to this, I tried to be as thorough as I could. I am not going to have the comments turned on specific to this video or that short video. If you backdoor it and you ask me in another video, I'll just let you know I'm not answering questions related to Form 1099s. You just got to go read it, because really at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. If you think you need to send it, then send it. I mean, really the biggest exception is you paid that person by credit card. Well, then you're not sending them a 1099. Well, if you send them by check and you paid them by credit card, well, then the amount you paid them by check, if it's over $600, and you put on 1099. If it's a Social Security number that you're paying to somebody, meaning they don't have an EIN, you're sending a 1099 NEC. You're paying a lawyer for legal services, you're sending a 1099 NEC. When in doubt, send a 1099 NEC. You're not going to go wrong with it from the standpoint of the IRS is wanting it to be reported. So if for some reason you think you should send it to Marriott and Office Depot, well, good luck getting their EIN. Maybe you can find it and Google it, whatever. You want to send it to them? Well, okay. If you are not a business owner, you're not sending these. If you're a business owner, that's just part of owning a business. Okay. And again, I'm just going to say as one last encouragement, if you're sending out 1099s and it's going to an individual, meaning you're putting a Social Security number on there, and it's not somebody that just is no way an employee, then you really need to consider, just because somebody's working at home, that doesn't mean they're an independent contractor at all. Just because they've set their own hours, that doesn't make them an independent contractor. Just because they're using their own computer doesn't make them an independent contractor. If they're not really providing services for anybody else, they're just providing them only for you, and that kind of starts screaming that they're an employee. So really on this Form 1099, most of our clients, they have less than 10. Maybe the lawyers that are sending out fees that they paid to other lawyers have a lot of 1099s, but most of our clients, there's one or two. It's the janitorial service. And you don't have to freak out. It's a janitorial service. It's coming once a week for 2 hours, and they got an EIN, right? As you can tell, see, we get in the nitty gritty. and if you made it to here, love you. But boy, this stuff is just bean counting. It's frustrating. So you probably heard it in my own voice. This stuff is like, what? But unfortunately, the IRS wants you to report this because there's people out there that don't report their income. And at the end of the day, you got to send it. Otherwise, it sounds funny, sounds like an overstatement. You're aiding and abetting in somebody not reporting their income. So at the end of the day, I'll just tell you this. In 30 years, I've never had a client that has gotten a penalty related to the 1099 because we just got them all out timely. All right. It's the only time that I've ever heard of anybody getting penalties. They just got mailed late. If it's the first time you're doing it, and there's a penalty, typically the IRS, if you write them a letter and say, listen, this is the first time for me doing it. I wasn't aware of this. It was wasn't willful. It was no neglect on my part. They might waive any kind of penalty for you. And then for me, the only time we've had 1099s audited, so to speak, is that we've had clients and they've had a state unemployment tax audit. And the state has said, hey, we want to see all your 1099s, because they're then wondering, well, why they get paid a 1099? Should they be an employee? Because the state, they want to be able to collect properly unemployment tax on employees. So, knock on wood, I've had IRS audits where they've asked for the 1099s, but I've never had a specific, only thing audited is the Form 1099s. And the only reason I'm just saying that is to just take a deep breath, right? And just get it done the best that you can, document what you can. If you got somebody that's they're going to dig in their heel, they're not going to give you their EIN number, then I don't know what to tell you. What we've done in the past is reported that best we could. And, you might not be able to e-file it. So sometimes we'll mail it. And so you just got to figure that one out on your own. Bottom line is, don't do business with people that aren't going to get you. And then when you move forward, make sure you're getting that Form W-9 on people, so that when it comes time to do the 1099, you're not getting into arguments and people upset. So at the end of the day, when in doubt, send a 1099 NEC. End of story, right? When in doubt, just do it, right? You almost can't go wrong. Really, where you go wrong is you don't send it to an individual that has a social that your business paid. You don't send it to an attorney. Where you also go wrong is that you send it to somebody that you paid them by credit card, because you're then doubling that up. And then the rest, just read through it. It's cumbersome, I get it, but take a deep breath. It's pretty darn straightforward. I probably should have mentioned it at the beginning. I will in the shorter video. But what we're looking at when we're trying to figure out, well, did somebody get paid over $600? We're looking at the general ledger, and we're just going through and we're looking at vendors and what are vendors that we see a routine amount. So I'm just eyeballing it. You got to remember, I'm working with small businesses. My clients have maybe a 50-page general ledger of the detail of expense. I mean, it just doesn't take that long to go through. We're marking them in QuickBooks. As we move forward, you can also print a vendor report in QuickBooks and see who's been paid over $600. So this video probably is not for the person who's done this before. This is not for the person that's a whiz bang and getting it done in QuickBooks. This is not for somebody that has done 1099s for multiple people. This is really meant to be for the person who, what am I supposed to do? How's this supposed to work? And that's where I'm just trying to give you a little bit of confidence to just, hey, do the best that you can. The biggest thing is get them out, get them the recipient and to the IRS on or before January 31st of the year following in which you're sending them. So this is being put out right at the beginning of 2023. So that would mean that you'd have till January 31st of 2023 to send them for 22. If you're watching this in the future, which is kind of cool, well, the due date's January 31st for the prior year for 1099 NEC. It's February 28th For those that are sending a Form 1099 miscellaneous to the IRS, but you still have to get that 1099 miscellaneous to the recipient by January 31st. Now, if you're e-filing your 1099 miscellaneous with the 1096 with the IRS, well, then you have till March 31st. All right, hopefully that was helpful. Appreciate you tuning in. If you made it to here and you're not a subscriber, come on, click it. I don't make any money off of it, but it tells me that I'm putting out some videos that are helping y'all. All right. Talk to you soon. And then love it if you'd subscribe. And don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me. Have a great one.